Hello, my name is coverkillernation, and welcome to Is the Album Alright? Shit, no, turn it off. I don't want to be sued. Anyways, last year, actually in fall last year, early winter last year, we talked about the New Stone Sour album, which was House of Golden Bones Part 1. And in a surprise revelation, and something that would defy television and actually cause more and more viewers to be sparked with interest, a Corey Taylor / Slipknot style project, well, Slipknot to the point that, it's just Corey Taylor's other band, actually received a really positive rating here from coverkillernation. I actually really enjoyed House of Golden Bones Part 1. Of course, that Part 1 means that there's a Part 2. That Part 2 was released here just this past Tuesday, yesterday, and it's time for us to examine this album. Now, whenever you have a Part 1 of an album that has been released kind of like 6 months prior, which is what was supposed to happen with Winter Sun's Time, however, Time Part 2 has been pushed back to potentially 2014, maybe another 8-year wait is on the way. What you really need is to have Part 2 definitely reinforce everything that you had in Part 1, while also adding in some new tricks to the story, also kind of furthering the plot along until you get to a rip-roaring finale. Now, with House of Golden Bones Part 2, what we are going to have and what we have on this album is the same solid songwriting that Part 1 was able to deliver for us. And that songwriting is a combination of really just pure storytelling as well as musical storytelling. And the parts of this that really impressed me with Part 1, which was the fact that they were able to transition from a really, rip-roaring, hard luck, song that was very heavily, influenced. They were able to flawlessly go to a song that's a little bit softer, maybe with a soft piano intro or an acoustic guitar, something that has a little bit more of a, not so much a dangerous quality, but rather a kind of a heartbreaking quality, or something that's requiring a little bit more introspective thinking, it's requiring a little bit more of a hard luck thought, and they're able to seamlessly transition from one to the other quite nicely, as you would see on a television show or a movie. The music advanced the plot in Part 1 very nicely, and right here in Part 2, it does so once again. Once again, they're able to do just that. They're able to seamlessly move the plot along in song. Now, many of the influences that I talked about in House of Golden Bones Part 1 that's not really going to change with Part 2, considering this was all kind of the same central thought, the same central idea, the same central principle. So whenever we talk about this musically, it's more about execution rather than what the style is all about. So for those of you who perhaps didn't see my video for House of Golden Bones Part 1, you may want to take some time and visit the link that's in the description box and maybe refresh your memory before you complete this video. However, with Part 2, what I enjoy about the storytelling is that there is a lot more of a revelation about the past of these characters. There's a lot more revelation about, how this all has come about and how everything has become the way that it is. And there's a lot of just thought-provoking lyricism here. It's not necessarily going to be done with a, college education, in poetry. It's not necessarily as though Walt Whitman was manifested into Corey Taylor and they developed these lavish, poetic, musings of these characters that just developed into fantastic stories, or in this case, a fantastic, epic, long story. Instead, what you're getting is, there's a feeling and a concept of reality to this, which definitely gives it a nice extra boost. That's the one thing that sometimes is lost in the balance in concept albums, is that maybe there are songwriters that are so locked into a certain style of writing a certain way that it becomes very difficult to transition into a more storytelling environment. Either that, or at least making the compositions loosely based around a story, or at least progress a plot along. Corey Taylor is able to do this actually very nicely and adds the dosage of humanity by making these characters feel very real. He makes them feel very familiar to us, in spite of their shortcomings, in spite of their flaws, in spite of what may have happened to them. And because of that, there's a certain degree of relatability to this, which is why this is going to go down as a tremendous two-part album saga. Now, with a concept album such as Operation Mindcrime by Queensryche, there is a lot of different talk that occurs on that record that really deals with, some very, very adult political, socio-political ideas that sometimes can go over people's heads. However, what was so engaging about that album was the mystery that was surrounding it. Not to mention, you're living in this world that is not unlike the one that we were living in back then, that just seemed as though everything was going to hell, going to pieces, and that everybody was going insane, in spite of the fact that there was only very few characters that actually fit that bill. Now, with House of Golden Bones Part 2, the best part that I have been able to really, view and listen to is the fact that Corey Taylor's voice is still once again a strong focal point here. You're not muddied down by anything that's going to distinctly remind you of Slipknot, as he's continuing to separate Stone Sour into the separate entity that it's been ever since its inception. However, there have been a lot of people that have bought simply based around the fact that it's Corey Taylor. And while that is something that is atypical of a side project environment, Corey Taylor has done a lot to make sure that the two entities remain different in the musical aspect. With this one, I feel a little bit more of a direct reference to some old school heavy metal and some old school just, good classic power rock, the type of stuff that you hear, on the radio, delivered by bands such as, Journey, or even some Judas Priest in there too. Whereas the powerful, powerful ballads that are on this album have a lot of punch behind them, and they're able to, really take a older style, and I hate the fact that I have to say that, but it's true, an older style composition where, you have this very tense and this very, heart, throttling environment, or this heartbreaking song that, eventually builds into a bit of a guitar solo that really just sort of bleeds out the emotion without words. And he's able to do that on this album. He's able to inflict a lot of power and damage with his lyrics on this album, and the music is able to, hold hands with that idea and continue that along. So overall, with everything that Corey Taylor has been able to imagine and reflect through the music and through the lyrics on this release, it all feels very, very nicely put together. You definitely feel as though you have a completion, and you're always wondering about this or that. Now, with this album, the one thing that I will say bogs my mind a little bit, and I think it did so on the first one as well, is that at some points in time, I feel as though it gets a little bit simplistic with the lyrics. Now, I know I just praised them by saying it gave it a definite element of reality. However, there are certain moments where I feel as though the rhymes are a little bit forced. But let's be honest here, if this is all that I'm really talking about in the negative fashion, I'm really nitpicking, and that's really a good sign, because this double album saga that was released at two different moments, House of Golden Bones 1 and 2, I gotta say, it's really revitalized my interest in Stone Sour. Well, okay, it's actually just developed my interest for Stone Sour. I know a lot about their previous discography, and I've never exactly always been all of that, down on them, but I've never necessarily been this up on them. I've always kind of been just in the middle, if not cheering a little bit more towards being not impressed. But with this double album saga, I am very impressed, and I have to give Corey Taylor a shitload of credit, if not an apology, considering I ratted on him a lot with his band Slipknot. So I gotta say, House of Golden Bones, I would give it a 4-star rating. I would give it an 8 out of 10, if not an 8.5. This was very solidly written. Very well done, and once again, I mean, this is crazy, Cover Killer Nation. It's very, very atypical, not atypical, it's not very typical that I get surprised so often in a year, let alone in a week. So yeah, Volbeat, Bring Me the Horizon's new album, and now Stone Sour's House of Golden Bones Cycle 1 and 2. All have been fantastic surprises, which is of course why you only hear one song from each of them on the radio, if that. It's the reason why you still hear everything else, and it's why it's now time for me to listen to some crap like Device. If I end up being surprised with Device, kill me. There you go. House of Golden Bones, I bow to you. Very well done. Thank you, and good night.